News. Well, all of the Gauteng metros finally have their mayoral committees, their DA mayors. It seems that almost all of the councils have mayors and speakers after the local elections, but some of the coalitions are still looking very fragile. You would have seen the Tshwane Mayoral Committee announced today. Professor Susan Booysen is a political analyst, director of research at MISRA. She joins us now. Professor, good afternoon to you. Let's start in the Gauteng. So Ekurhuleni, Tshwane and Joburg, we have DA mayors elected with help from the EFF, but the EFF is not in their coalitions or in their mayoral committees. It's going to be an interesting 5 years, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. Stephen, we really have got instability and precarious governance spelt out all over the face of these local governments. I have added up the numbers of seats per council that each of these coalitions, not ANC, DA coalitions in the metros is bringing to us. And in Tshwane, there is an outright majority, but by the partners that are announced in Johannesburg and in Ekurhuleni, it is sitting on slightly below an outright majority level. In other words, there are governing coalitions, but in essence, it is minority government coalitions. So on all of the important votes, where they require a 50% plus one vote majority, they will definitely have to call on other political parties, perhaps EFF, perhaps Patriotic Alliance. Patriotic Alliance had been hoping to be included, to be bargaining their way right to the top of these municipal executives, but they did not. So it's always going to be a question of negotiation and bargaining between the parties when important votes come.
So to do anything is going to require a lot of horse trading, and it's going to come down to budgets. It's going to be line item by line item. Is it really possible to govern in that situation?
It is perhaps this kind of governance is what one would prefer to a huge majority party just coming in and assuming and can accept that all its decisions will just be fine and they can just push budgets through, just adopt budgets with guaranteed majorities. So in some way, there can be, not necessarily, but there can be merit in parties having to bargain their ways through this type of negotiations, and it can bring accountability. It can, of course, also bring disproportionate bargaining in exchange for a few votes by small political parties. But one can hope that when those parties do that kind of negotiation, it will at least be to the benefit of a particular, some or another particular community in that council.
We talk about the DA mayors in these metros in Ekurhuleni, in Joburg and in Tshwane and Gauteng, but in eThekwini and Nelson Mandela Bay, it's the ANC that really has a fragile majority or fragile coalition there. Are they under the same kind of pressure in those two metros?
Huge, yes. You know, in these Gauteng metros, at least we see political parties like at the ASA, etc., especially ASA, coming in with a significant chunk of votes. In some places, the IFP has quite a few votes, or the ACDP comes in with a few. Freedom Front Plus comes in with a few, for example, in Tshwane. So there are sizable blocks, even if quite modest, but one can call them sizable, in the Gauteng metros. But if one thinks that of eThekwini, for example, there the ANC for its majority depends on this scattering of tiny basically one-seat parties. They're almost 10 different tiny parties that are included in that executive committee. That is, of course, a PR-style committee, but PR doesn't come in terms of the bigger parties. But the ANC will definitely have to be very, very fine footwork in order to keep that coalition together. And from experience, what we know in coalitions in small local municipalities and big metros alike, it can be one political party, like we saw in Nelson Mandela Bay the last time around, that switches, and like the UDM likes switching there between the ANC and the DA, and it can change the whole makeup of government. So indeed, it is very difficult to hold together a large grouping of community parties who are really in there to bargain for their communities. But perhaps, you know, the name of that game can be very clear. Deliver to that particular community that a particular small party represents, and you've got the allegiance of that party, and perhaps stability of an alliance and coalition when it's in government. But it will definitely take a lot of continuous work. But perhaps that brings more accountability.
You could also, if you do it right, subsume that party into yours. It's happened before, I think. Professor Susan Booysen, thanks very much indeed.